We live in a postmodern age, an era of progress and enlightenment, but our world was not always so advanced. For most of human history, men lived in a time when kings were gods, when religion ruled and science was untested. It was an age of tradition and duty. It was a medieval world. When the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, a rooster crowed somewhere nearby, announcing the arrival of a brand new day. With the first hint of light, a man stirred in his bed. He pulled himself from a bed of straw, his body stiff and aching from yesterday's labor. He sat up and looked around him. The room he occupied was little more than a shack, with walls made of packed earth and a roof of thatch. He shared this dwelling with his wife and children, along with their few meager possessions: a stool, a table, a chest, and a large hearth that doubled as a cooking fire and a source of warmth in the evening. This humble abode had been in his family for generations, passed down from father to son since the time of his ancestors. Outside, the land stretched out as far as the eye could see. Fields of grain, rows of fruit trees, and patches of vegetable gardens dotted the landscape. Beyond the fields, a dark and imposing forest stood like a silent giant, holding secrets and dangers within its depths. Life here was simple, unchanging, and unforgiving. The man was a peasant. His life revolved around the rhythm of the seasons, dictated by the needs of the land and the whims of his lord. He rose slowly, his joints protesting the effort. Years of backbreaking labor had taken their toll on his body, leaving him with a permanent ache that was a constant reminder of his servitude. Today, like every day, he would wake before sunrise to begin his work in the fields. The sun was his master, setting the pace for his toil. As it climbed higher in the sky, so did his sweat, each drop a testament to his physical burden. The soil he tilled belonged not to him, but to his lord. Every furrow he plowed and every seed he planted was a small victory against the uncertainty of nature's bounty. The land offered both sustenance and challenge. In good years, the harvest was plentiful, providing food and a sense of security. But in lean times, it could turn against them, offering meager returns and the specter of famine. The peasants' existence was a precarious one. They survived on the promise of rain, the warmth of the sun, and the capricious mercy of the earth. Their lives were a constant negotiation with nature's forces. Their faith in God was as unwavering as their dependence on the land. They prayed for rain in times of drought and for protection from the fury of storms. Their world was one where the divine and the mundane were intertwined. Religion was not just a matter of faith, it was a way of life. As the rooster continued his proud song, the man finished dressing, pulling on a rough linen shirt and tying a belt around his waist. His trousers were secured with a leather strap, and on his feet he wore sturdy leather shoes, his tools of survival. In his hands he held a crusty piece of bread, as hard as stone, which he dipped into a wooden mug filled with weak ale. This meager breakfast was his sustenance for the hours ahead. The bread, heavy and dense, offered some semblance of nourishment. The ale, though watered down, helped to ease the dryness in his throat. It wasn't much, but it was enough to sustain him through the day. In the medieval world, meat was a luxury reserved for the nobles and feast days. For the common folk, protein came in the form of eggs and dairy products. Cheese, a staple of their diet, was made from the milk of their cow or goat, and eggs provided a valuable source of nutrition. Fish, when available, was also consumed. Hunting, however, was mostly forbidden to peasants, with the right to hunt being a privilege granted only to the nobility. Most days, his breakfast consisted of this simple fare, sometimes supplemented by the remains of last night's supper. Meat was a rare treat, a luxury he could ill afford. For him, life was a constant struggle against hunger. Every bite he took was earned, every crumb savored, unlike his lord, who feasted on roasted meats and fine breads. The peasant's table was laden with grains, turnips, and the occasional piece of fruit. When the harvest failed or the winter lingered too long, hunger became an annoying companion. Meals were unpredictable, dependent on the whims of nature and the demands of the lord. Sometimes there were feasts, communal gatherings where the villagers shared their meager meals together. These occasions, though rare, were moments of respite, a chance to trade news and stories while sharing their hard-earned food. His lord demanded his share of every crop, leaving the peasant with just enough to sustain himself and his family. The church, too, took its tithe, a tenth of the produce, which left the remaining portion of the harvest barely enough to ensure survival through the long, hungry winter. After his brief breakfast, he turned to his daily task. The fields awaited, and with them, the cycle of planting, weeding, and harvesting. He walked out into the open field, the vast expanse stretching out before him like a green carpet. The land was his domain, his place of both labor and sustenance. There, amidst the rows of crops, he spent his days. In summer, the sun scorched his skin, and in winter, the cold gnawed at his bones. His hands, calloused and strong, knew the feel of the soil. His back, stooped from years of labor, understood the rhythm of the crops. Life on the land was not just about working the soil. It was about understanding its moods, respecting its rhythms, and enduring its challenges. Storms could damage crops, pests could devour fields, and droughts could wither the land. But the peasant persevered. They celebrated the first buds of spring as a promise of renewal and rejoiced in the final harvest as a victory over nature's uncertainty. Sickness was a constant shadow. The peasant had no doctor to turn to in times of illness. Herbs and prayers were their only remedies. Wars were fought not on distant shores, but on their very doorsteps. When the call to arms sounded, he might be dragged from his fields into service. He did not fight for glory or a king's ransom, but because his master commanded it. On the battlefield, he was a nameless face in a sea of men, his life as expendable as the crops that fed them. His service was not one of choice, but of obligation, a duty owed to a lord who cared little for his life. When evening fell, he returned home, his muscles aching, his clothes stained with the sweat and dust of the fields. The familiar sight of his hut greeted him, a beacon of warmth and rest after a long day's labor. Inside, his family waited, their faces etched with the hardships of their life. His wife, weathered by years of toil, her hands gnarled from working the land. His children, their eyes wide with innocence and hardship. For them, he worked not just to survive, but to offer them a sliver of comfort in a world that offered little. His home was a sanctuary, imperfect, fragile, but theirs. Within its leaky walls and sagging roof, they found solace. The air inside was thick with the smells of wood smoke, animals, and the everyday life of his family. The earthen floor was worn and bare, the roof above patched and uneven, but to him it was a haven, a place where he could lay his burdens down and find a moment's peace. Life here was not without its joys. Festivals in the village square, a wedding celebration, the birth of a child. These were the moments that gave meaning to their arduous existence. These were the sparks of happiness that kept them going through the bleak days, reminding them that even in the hardest of times, life could offer glimmers of beauty and hope. For a peasant, life was not a game of glory or conquest. It was a constant negotiation with the elements, a struggle against hunger and an unending cycle of work. He was not a knight in shining armor nor a king in his castle. He was a nameless face, a cog in the machinery of the medieval world. He was the backbone of society, enduring the heaviest burdens, toiling in obscurity, sacrificing for a world that rarely acknowledged his existence. And so the sun set on another day in the life of a peasant. The sky blazed with colors of orange and purple as the day drew to a close. The stars began their slow ascent, one by one, replacing the fading daylight with their cold, distant glow. The peasant, weary and silent, trudged back to his humble abode, his steps echoing the rhythm of a life that knew no other tune but toil. Within the four rough-hewn walls of his home he found solace, albeit a tenuous one. For within those walls he was not just a nameless worker, he was a husband, a father, a son, and in those roles he found the strength to endure another day in a world that offered him no escape.